Today is April the 1st, year 2006. Now the label I will put on this tape today will be concerning the Ark of the Covenant. And where will the Ark be found and when? Now the first audio tape that I had ever done years and years ago was concerning the Ark of the Covenant. And I did this in response to Ron Wyatt was circulating through Northern California and Southern Oregon or wherever I was at the moment. And a lot of people were convinced that he did find the Ark of the Covenant in a cave in Jerusalem years ago. But there was always some reason that he just couldn't quite pull it out. He could touch it and all this and reach in there and scrape on it and so forth like this. And he brought back all these images, these pictures, and he would circulate not only in Adventist churches, but he'd go to the Baptist and Methodist or anybody that would listen to his stories. And he was always trying to raise money for another expedition. And this was, of course, the Brimsmead situation was always associated with the finding of the Ark of the Covenant. So it was really popular in Adventist circles years and years ago. Well, it's come time now. Now, I haven't heard this CD. It's on my website, but I know I haven't heard it for 5 or 6 years, maybe longer than that. And ever so often there's a request that comes in for it, and I make a copy of it, but I have no idea what it was I said. But I still know what I would use today with early writings is all the evidence I need. And I know that all those statements, forwards and backwards, in 7a of the Bible comments. And now, before I start giving some documentation, let me say a few words right here about, for years I was on an Adventist forum where we was discussing the Ron Wyatt situation. And the man that's in charge of his museum, Ron Wyatt's museum now, he was on there, him and his wife. And so I had many interchanges of words. And now what Ron Wyatt had to say about the Red Sea crossing or finding of the ark that Noah built, I don't want to get into that at all. He may have some credibility on those things, and I would never question him on that. But when he says that he found the Ark of the Covenant, now that's a different story, because I know what the Spirit of Prophecy teaches on this subject. Just so plain. And but let me mention a fact here that now Colin Standish was interviewing Danny Shelton one time. Now I don't know how much credibility how much confidence you have in either one of these two men's testimonies, but somewhere along the line, somebody is telling the truth, and we should give them the benefit of the doubt. And I just happen to believe that Danny Shelton was telling the truth, and Colin Standish did an excellent job of interviewing him. Because what took place was Ron Wyatt, he needed $10,000. He's always needing money, and he can cry on demand when he'd get before that pulpit and say, "Look, folks, we got to have another expedition. We got to find that Ark of the Covenant." And that way it'll be convincing proof to all these atheists out there that God's law was written with His own finger, and we're going to bring that out of the cave, because I've found the cave and I know where it is. All we got to do is get it out. And people will just turn their pocketbooks upside down to give to Ron Wyatt. Well, Ron Wyatt, he came to Danny Shelton one time, wanted $10,000, and he said, "Danny, I'll give you the exclusive rights to film, let 3ABM film me taking that Ark of the Covenant out of this cave that I found years ago." So Danny said, well, I don't have that kind of money. But there was somebody there at 3ABN with deep pockets. They said, well, Danny, we'll let you have the money. So you and Linda and Philip Follett, you go over there and take the crew with you. So they paid Ron Wyatt $10,000 for the exclusive rights. Well, the day came when they were to all assemble outside the cave. Ron Wyatt told them where it was going to be, and I'll be there bright and early the next morning. Well, the film crew was there. Well, there was other people there that had cameras as well, and they were ready to start filming because Ron had promised somebody else that they could film it as well. And the conversation was, these other people with cameras, they were talking about being out in bars the night before and partying and so forth, and here 3ABN was there pretending to be Christians, and they had their cameras ready. Well, Ron Wyatt didn't show up, so they called him up, says, Ron, hey, you were scheduled to be here at a certain time. We're all ready to film. Well, Ron Wyatt was up in his hotel room booking other appointments for other expeditions, and he wouldn't come down. He says, no, the Lord says today's not the day. So they waited another day, and Ron Wyatt says, no, today's not the day. The Lord didn't give me permission to go down there today. So the third day, Philip Follett says, now wait a minute, Ron. Now Philip Follett was an attorney for 3ABN at the time. So he said, now Ron, now wait a minute now. You've got your $10,000 and we don't have nothing. Now I'm going to go down in that cave and see what you've done down there. So he went down into the cave. And his testimony was, which I believe, he says that there hadn't been any new excavation there for 150 years. And Ron showed all these movies that he probably made that movie in Hollywood or somewhere. And wherever it was a spurious teachings. And I'll get into that. But when you really pin those Ron Wyatt people down, and Ron was still living at the time, and people pleaded with him to recant of what he claimed, but he wouldn't do it. He took it right to his deathbed. But the people that are managing his website, they says, Ron says later on, well, he says, you don't think I would take those people to the right cave, do you? The cave that Philip Follett went down into, that wasn't the right one. Well, he told them it was before. Now, if he took them to the wrong place and showed them where to meet, then he was lying. And it's not right to lie. I don't care how you justify it. And now there's a words that I use quite a bit over in Proverbs 20:17, I think it is. It says, words of deceit is sweet to a man, but afterwards his mouth shall be filled with gravel. And in the margin for deceit it says it's lying. Now if Ron Wyatt told them where the cave was and they were supposed to meet out there, and then later he changed the story and says that wasn't the right cave, that's lying. But when you really pin them down farther, Ron Wyatt says that, well, actually, I took the ark out and I went and re-hid it. Now that is the testimony coming, that's public knowledge. That's been on the Adventist forums for a long time. That was his testimony. That he took the ark out of that cave that was hidden and he hid it somewhere else. But my argument was, all those years, hundreds of different interchanges of words that I had with Ron Wyatt's people that manages his website. I can't think the name now, Jim and Sally, I think, something like that. But they mentioned the fact that that Ron was wise enough to not take him to the right cave, and then later on he went down there and took it out and re-hid it. Well, the Spirit of Prophecy says that ark is safely hidden from the human family. Well, my argument was either God doesn't know how to hide, or Ron White's not human. Now, I reject the first one completely. But it's safely hidden from the human family. That's what the Spirit of Prophecy says. But let me get into a few of these statements right here that a lot of people I cut my teeth on those things 10 years ago. I'm not sure I can remember them all now, but I remember there was one in 7A, probably about 1107. And let's see, my book is not right in here right now. But it mentioned the fact that it was safely hidden from the human family and has never been disturbed. It says that sacred ark, this is in Prophets and Kings, that sacred ark is yet hidden. It has never been disturbed since it was first secreted. Now, the people who don't know, you might remember that before the temple was destroyed, that holy men took the ark and hid it in a cave. And the Spirit of Prophecy says here that sacred ark is yet hidden. It has never been disturbed. But now the popular teaching is, especially the Brimsmead, that says when the Ark of the Covenant is found, that's when the judgment of the living will begin. Now, in order to say the few words here today, I've got to get into the judgment of the living. Now, I've put this off for a long time. And, of course, now what is the popular teachings about the ark, the judgment of the living? Well, everybody waits around and see what Vance Farrell says about a subject, and then that's what they kind of run with. Well, let me tell you that Vance Farrell, his credibility is not always reliable. And I know what he has said and Colin Standish has said, but they still put the judgment of the living off in the future. But the way human nature is, if you take those statements that suggest that when the Ark of the Covenant is found, that's when the judgment of the living will begin. Well, the way we are, we'd put off getting things right with God. I would say, well, my name starts with W, so there's no sense me if I'll wait until the Ark of the Covenant is found, and then they'll start judging the people that their names begin with A and B. And it'll take a while before it gets to my name, so I can just procrastinate and I can live in pleasures of sin for another season. But let me mention something right here about all these side issues in Adventism that are non-salvational issues. Now, many people that's what they claim. They won't even discuss anything because they say, well, that's a non-salvational issue. And they said, you're always talking about those 7 seals or 7 trumpets. They're not salvational issues. I beg your pardon, sir. Anybody that suggests that the 7 seals is not a salvational issue, well, that's the investigative judgment in verity. Now, Adventists haven't discovered that yet, but someday they will, but it may be too late for some, because they've been listening to these hireling shepherds out there that has their evangelism in a can. Everything is all mapped out for them. They don't get a chance to study at all. But these side issues and all these doctrines that we embrace, let me give you a rule of thumb right here of any doctrine that we accept. It says, when the doctrine we accept kills sin in the heart, purifies the soul from defilement, bears fruit unto holiness, we may know that it is truth of God. Now that's the kind of doctrines we should accept. Yeah, if people want to bring up a doctrine that it's time to stop sinning and it will kill sin in their heart, I'd say, amen, brother. Let's hear more of those kind of sermons. Now, I just read an interchange of words between the Sydney Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. I'm not sure how these divisions are over in Australia. But they had called some people on the carpet for, they wanted to know if they could qualify to be an independent ministry that would be approved by the conference. And they were going to use as their rule these 27 fundamentals, or now it's 28 fundamentals. And of course, this group, they couldn't accept those 28 fundamentals, because there's a few points in there that are not true to the Word of God. But on close examination, I wish everybody could read this interchange of words between this ministry. I'm not even sure where they're located in Australia, and the Sydney Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And I know the headquarters are right there in Sydney. But the bottom line is, they don't really believe that Jesus was a begotten Son of God. And they don't even believe that God the Father has a form. They believe he's just like an essence. Now, in Ministry of Healing today, I was reading about that. When a person believes that God doesn't have a form. I just think of all those beautiful statements in earlier writings that we could read to prove that God has a form. Jesus says that the Father has a form just like himself. And yet not one of these brethren on that council of men that were interviewing these brothers, they all scoffed at the idea that God the Father has a Son and that he was begotten. Anyway, you need to read that interchange of words. But my subject today is on the Ark of the Covenant. And I don't care whose toes I step on. I know that Jonathan Gray is over there in Australia. And he's scattered his confusion. He's picked up all these things that Ron White suggested. And he's kind of run with them. Now, I don't know how many people over there are under the influence that the Ark of the Covenant is still yet to be found. But I think on my CD I did years ago, we'll find out exactly when that thing is brought forth for the whole world to see. But any doctrines that we accept today, the way we should measure whether we call it a side issue or not, does it kill sin in their heart? Does it purify the soul from defilement and bears fruit unto holiness? Then we know that that's truth of God. So that's right. If we've drawn a line in the sand like Vance Farrell and Colin Standish and say the judgment of the living is still in the future, and I can procrastinate and wait until that's found, then I'll know that it's begun, then I can wait a little bit, and then when it finally gets down to my name, well then I can then finally jump over on the bandwagon. But there's a statement here in Testimonies to Ministers, page 234. It says, the time of the judgment is a most solemn period, when the Lord gathers his own from among the tares. See, the reasoning that people get started off wrong is because they have a misunderstanding. And they think that this judgment of the living is an instantaneous act. But that statement I just read to you in Testimonies to Ministers says that it's a process rather than an event. It's a period when the Lord gathers His own from among the tares. Testimonies to Ministers 2, 3, 4. We are judged by our response to the light of truth that God allows to shine upon our pathway. And here's how it works out. I mean, I cannot improve not one iota on the words of Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1 of the Testimonies, 187. God leads His people on step by step. He brings them up to different points calculated to manifest what is in the heart. Some endure at one point but fall off at the next. At every advanced point the heart is tested and tried a little closer. Individuals are tested and proved a length of time. It can't go on forever. It's a length of time to see if they will sacrifice their idols and heed the counsel of the true witness. The true witness is Jesus. That in Revelation 3. If any will not be purified through obeying the truth and overcome their selfish and pride and evil passions, the angels of God have their charge. They are joined to their idols and let them alone. And they pass on their work, and leaving these with their sinful traits unsubdued to the control of evil angels. Now, the true witness is Jesus, and he's the counsel is to Laodicea versus Philadelphia. And Robert Brimsmead, he says that this Philadelphia Laodicean question is only a side issue. That's not what the Spirit of Prophecy teaches. The Spirit of Prophecy teaches that the destiny of the church hangs upon this as to how you receive it. It's vital that you receive the counsel of the true witness. But the point has to come when, now I'll get some statements. I know them forwards and backwards. Over in 7A 960 and 7A 972. That I'll quote for you here verbatim. But I may grab the book and read it to you, but I know it well enough. You just look it up. It says that angels of God are weighing moral worth. They are watching the development of characters in those now living. How much plainer do you want it? It says when you're walking the street, God is measuring you. Now in 1884, Ellen White wrote prophetically. She says that the grand work of judgment has been going on now for 40 years. Soon, none know how soon it will begin with the living. So that means it hadn't begun in 1884. But then you start clicking off the years and you just watch what the Spirit of Prophecy says. All of a sudden here come along volume number 6. She says, just now, as the judgment of the living is about to begin. Now that was 101 years ago, Vance Farrell. You're still pointing to the future for the judgment of the living to begin. And I've got one more little paragraph to read in that 1T 187 quote there. So that means that angels have their charge, leave them alone, they're joined to their idols, and they're left to the control of evil angels. Unsubdued. Those who come up to every point and stand every test and overcome, be the price what it may, have heeded the counsel of the true witness, and they will receive the latter rain and thus be fitted for translation. You don't receive the latter rain until you overcome every besetment. You don't hear that in Adventist pulpits. Just read Early Writings, page 71. Early Writings, page 271 for that information. then the latter rain will come upon you. And then you'll be fitted for translation. Thus we are to be ready moment by moment as God brings us up to His standards on every point. He distinctly states the suddenness of His coming. Now, a lot of people think that this coming when you see Him in the clouds. That's not so at all. If you just look in Testimonies, volume number 2, page 190, that she clarifies this statement. Now, let me read this again here, where you'll get the drift of it right here. He distinctly states the suddenness of His coming. He's talking about our names coming up in the judgment. He does not measure the time, lest we neglect a momentary preparation, and in our indolence look ahead to the time when we think He will come. In other words, when that Ark of the Covenant is found, then the judgment of the living will begin. And in our indolence, look ahead to the time when we think He will come and defer the preparation. In other words, I'll just wait a while. That's 2T, page 190, 191. But now, you know, God designs that men shall decide not from impulse, but from weight of evidence, carefully examining Scripture with Scripture. Now that's found in Desire of Ages, page 458. Now God's design is that we should do what? Base our opinions upon weight of evidence and not upon an impulse. Now, in earlier writings, to me that just settles the whole issue. I don't need to go any further else for me. And I know those pages forwards and backwards. I can just see it in my mind's eye without even opening the book. On page 32, which is on the left-hand side, Ellen White was taken and was transported to heaven, and the veil was lifted. And here's what she says: in the holiest, that means in the most holy place, I saw an ark. In the ark was a golden pot of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of stone which folded together like a book. And I saw that if God had changed the Sabbath from the seventh to the first day, He would have changed the writings of the Sabbath commandment written on tables of stone, which are now in the ark in the most holy place in the temple in heaven. They're now there. Now that should just settle the issue right there for anybody that believes in the spirit of prophecy and if they're honest. And all these other statements that are obscure, and they put these theologians, the Brimsmead and the Ford theologians, have put their own little twist on it. How much plainer you want it? Just a clear statement that the ark is now in heaven. But then you hear the scoffers out there. Here they come. They say, well, now, sir, don't you realize that that's only a copy? The one that's hidden in the cave is only a copy. The great original is hidden in heaven. Now, I know all about these statements forwards and backwards, but just bear with me here now. In the ark was a golden pot of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of stone. That's early writings, page 32. Now there is no reason to believe that there was an original pot of manna, or that there was a duplicate of Aaron's rod that budded. And as for the tables of stone, Now listen to this statement right out here of Story of Redemption. While God gave to Moses a copy of his law, he preserved the great original in the sanctuary above. Now, what do you think the great original was or is? Well, the great original is a transcript of his character. Are you aware, Jonathan Gray, of all the gray paint you've scattered out there among those Australian brethren to believe the Ron White deception? That Patriarch and Prophet says the law of God is as sacred as himself. It is a revelation of his will, a transcript of his character. Great Controversy 434 says the law of God in the sanctuary in heaven is the great original, of which the precepts inscribed upon the tables of stone and recorded by Moses were an unerring transcript. Now, the angels in heaven, they marveled that there was even, I think that's, let's see, that if I can remember that's Thoughts of Mental Blessings, page 109. That the angels marveled that there was even such a law written down. Now, do you think that there's secrets in heaven? Would God have a law up there? Now, this was before Satan, while Satan was up there. The angels didn't even know that there was such a law written down. No. The great original is a transcript of God's character. But the words there in Early Writings, page 33, it says that the tables of stone are now in the ark in the most holy place in the temple of heaven. I should just settle it right there. They're now there. That means at one time they weren't there. Isn't that what the word now means? If I was to say that the car is now parked out in the street, that means at one time it was either in the driveway or it was in the garage. The car is now in the street. And Ellen White plainly says that the ark is now in the most holy place in the temple in heaven. Now, there's no question about these men, holy men, secreted the ark and put it in a cave. And it's safely hidden from the human family. And it's never been disturbed. Now, when God took the Garden of Eden back to heaven, you remember when he did that? He took the Garden of Eden back to heaven just before the flood. And when God takes things, does he disturb it? I don't think we should even get into that kind of a vocabulary. When God takes things, it's not disturbed. He took it to heaven. And if you use the reasoning of the Jonathan Grays and the Ron Whites of this world, it had to be disturbed for him to take the pot of manna and Aaron's rod that budded to heaven. No, he took them all at the same time. He took it, whenever he took it, that's his business. I don't want to even get into that. All I know is, you take a plain statement that says the ark is now in heaven. She saw it there. That should settle it right there once and for all. But as far as the Garden of Eden, when Adam is introduced once again after the resurrection, he goes back to heaven. He'll see the Garden of Eden again. He'll see the very trees and the vines that he trained. Now, for thousands of years, 6,000 years. When Adam looks at it, it will appear to him as if it is just hadn't even been disturbed. The very vines that he trained. I think you'll read that about 648 of Great Controversy. But now here's a statement here that's 1109 of 7a. That precious record of the law was placed in the Ark of the Testament and is still there in the Ark, safely hidden from the human family. Now again, if Ron White found it, as he's convinced thousands and thousands of Seventh-day Adventists, that they want to be deceived, in my opinion. And once you've opened your pocketbook and turned it upside down, then you finally do begin to believe it yourself. You don't want to be found gullible. You have to believe it after you've paid the price. But it's safely hidden from the human family. The tables of stone are hidden by God. The tables of stone hidden by God until that day will be presented before the world. All you have to do is look in the Great Controversy as to when the Ark of the Covenant is revealed to the world. Adventists are always going to be off balance. The way they teach Revelation today, they got one foot in quicksand and then the other one on a banana peeling. And now those are pretty harsh words, but it's the absolute truth. And they're always going to be off balance until they understand how orderly that Revelation has been written and preserved for us end-time people. Ellen White says that a minister has a chart, and he ought not to guess at anything. Well, they do guess at things. And I mentioned the 7 seals a while ago. And people claim to me that they're not a salvational issue. I beg your pardon, sir, the ones that are only surface readers. And Ellen White plainly says that it's a vital point for you to understand Revelation 5 and 6. If you don't, you will not act a part in the closing scenes of this earth's history. I don't care how many satellite dishes you have. I don't care how many continents you reach with your canned evangelism. If you don't understand Revelation 5, the 7 seals correctly, you will not act a part in the closing scenes of this earth's history. But if you use the reasoning, well, Ron White used to say, oh boy, you just wait and see. Just wait till I bring that ark out. One more expedition is all it's going to take. And then for him to fabricate and says he reached in there and he scraped on the ark and he scraped some of that blood off of that ark and he took it down and had it analyzed, and that blood showed that blood didn't come from no human, didn't have a human father, the chromosomes or something or another. You know, I killed a deer one time. I didn't intend to, because I don't shoot deer, but it was a complete accident. I just didn't even put the gun to my shoulder. I just raised up and he had his foot up there jerking my limbs down off of my almond tree and eating the limbs, and I just run out there and didn't even have the gun in my hand. I said, get out of here. And the deer was probably 40 yards away and just looked at me. So I had a 22 right there. And so I just grabbed it and just shot. I didn't even put it to my shoulder. And the deer took about 3 steps forward and turned around and started coming back to me, and I said, oh no. I was just sick. Absolutely sick. Deer took about 4 steps coming back towards me and fell over dead. So I run in the house and got a bigger gun because I've never shot a deer before, and I've heard people tell stories about blowing a hole in a deer big enough you could put your fist in, and still they run 300 or 400 yards, and I didn't want the deer to suffer. So I went in the house and got a bigger gun, and I was going to shoot the deer in the head and kill it. I went out there and it was already dead. And so anyway, I couldn't even look that deer in the face. I tied a rope around its two legs, and I drug it about 100 yards off back into the woods. You know how long that deer lasted out there? Less than a week. I mean, within the day, the buzzards found that guy. After the buzzards got through, here come the foxes at night. And all the predators preyed on that carcass. Then after that, here, all the insects, they came in, and they took over. They licked up all the blood, just the way God designed it. And Ron White wants you to believe that there was still some blood after 2,000 years to be analyzed. I saw a deer carcass disappear within a week. Not a trace of entrail, blood, hide, or nothing. Gone. Most of the skeleton was gone. Some foxes or whatever it was, they had their young to take care of. They carried part of it away. Matter of fact, one day I was coming down the road, and there it was. The carcass was right in the road, so I had to get out and throw it back in the bushes. How gullible are people to believe that blood could still be on the chest, the ark after 2,000 years and be analyzed? People just love to be fooled. That's all I can say. But let me get in some statements now about this judgment of the living as to when. And remember, Ellen White wrote prophetically in the Great Controversy. What is found in the 1911 Great Controversy, page 490. But where you want to read it, out of the original Great Controversy. You want to read the books that the way she wrote it. The one where she wrote about the investigative judgment. That's what she called that title, and you people out there that have changed that title, calling it Facing Life's Record, as though you are ashamed of the beautiful words that God inspired, the investigative judgment. And but in 1884, in the original Great Controversy, she wrote that the grand work of judgment has been going on now for 40 years. Soon, none know how soon, it will pass to the cases of the living. And that's exactly what took place in 1844. That's when judgment began with the dead. Now, you want a quote for that? Great Controversy, 483, right at the top of the page. It goes like this. As the books of record are opened in the judgment, the lives of all those who believe on Jesus come in review. Beginning with those that first lived on the earth, our advocate will present the cases of each successive generation, and it closes with the living. You need to read that whole page. Get over to the next page there. I can't remember all the words, but it says that anyway, a person is judged the length of time. I mean, once it begins with the living. But in volume 6 of the Testimonies, she says, here in 1882, she says, at such a time as this, just as the great work of judging the living is to begin, shall we allow unsanctified ambitions to take possession of the heart? She said that's 526. And then in 1886, here's what she says. She says, if the investigative judgment has not already commenced for the living, it will soon begin. Vance Farrell, 119 years is not soon. The word soon just doesn't work for me the way you want to suggest it to back up your bogus theology. That was in 1886, manuscript release number 226. If the investigative judgment has not already commenced for the living, it will soon begin. And in 1887 she says, we are fast approaching the close of our probation. Let every soul inquire, how do I stand before God? We do not know how soon our names may be taken into the lips of Christ, and our cases be finally decided. What will these decisions be? Shall we be counted with the righteous, or shall we be numbered with the wicked? But then in 1900, what does the Spirit of Prophecy teach us? Now, when the great work of judging the living is about to begin, shall we allow unsanctified ambitions to take possession of the heart and lead us to neglect the education required to meet the needs in this day of peril? That's 6T 139. Hadn't begun in 1900. She says just now is about to begin. But then 1902, what does she say? The time has come when everything is to be shaken that can be shaken, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Every case is coming in review before God. He is measuring the temple and the worshipers therein. 7T, page 219. In 1903, she says, the time has come when Jerusalem is being searched with lighted candles. God is at work investigating characters, weighing moral worth, and pronouncing decisions on individual cases. Don't you buy into that suggestion by these hireling shepherds that says Jesus is your judge. There's no question about God the Father being the judge. Yes, Jesus is a judge. He'll be judged during the 1,000 years in heaven. And also the redeemed people will sit on the judgment seat with him and will judge fallen angels. That's what 2 Peter teaches us. Don't you know that you'll judge judge angels, the Bible says? But what happens is, it seems to be the idea in the minds of some people that the judgment of the living is a sudden and instantaneous act, and as already stated that it is yet in the future, and that it will be announced in advance as be accompanied with some great fanfare. Oh yeah, the Ark of the Covenant will be found, and so forth. But, inspiration just does not allow all this guesswork to go on. Great Controversy says that he has a chart, talking about a minister, and he ought not guess at anything. Now, you have any idea who the sealing angel is? I put on an Adventist forum recently that it was Gabriel. It was the sealing angel, and the manager of this website, he come back and he says, "Well, I never heard that before." And so what I did was I just opened early writings everywhere you want to look there. I think it's page 89 and 118. It goes words like this. I then saw the third angel, said my accompanying angel. Fearful is his work, awful is his mission. He is the angel that is to select the wheat from the tares and seal or bind the wheat for the heavenly garner. Early writings, page 218. I saw a little company traveling a narrow pathway. All seemed to be firmly united, bound together by the truth in bundles or companies, said the angel. the third angel is binding or sealing them in bundles for the heavenly garner. Early Writings 88-89. Now listen to these words right here. And we can get over into over into Ezekiel 9 and read about the instruction that Jesus gave to this sealing angel, which is Gabriel. And he says, Gabriel, I want you to place a mark only on those men that are sighing and crying over the abominations done in the church. That's the only ones that will receive the seal of God. You've got to be alive to receive the seal of God. And 144,000 just happens to be the only ones to receive the seal of God in their forehead. If you don't know that, take this tape out right now and put it on pause or whatever you do, but just open your Bible to Revelation 3:12 and read it. It's the Philadelphia church condition that receives the seal of God. Then flip over to Revelations 14:1-3 and you'll see that it's 144,000 that stand on Mount Zion without spot. And now listen to these words right here. Early Writings. An angel with the writer's inkhorn by his side returned from the earth and reported to Jesus that his work was done, and the saints were numbered and sealed. You know, the last words in Ezekiel 9 is, this angel says, I have done what you told me to do. You know, angels are obedient. They're more than willing to do what the Son of God asks. And while I'm on this subject, do you realize that God the Father is number one, Jesus is number two, and at one time, Satan was number three. Lucifer was number three, I should say. He was number three in heaven next to Christ. And if you want to talk about this holy trio that's in heaven, it would be God the Father, His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and the third one in command is Gabriel. He's the sealing angel. Now this Trinity doctrine, which was only voted on in 1980 at Dallas, Texas, is something that hireling shepherds introduced to Seventh-day Adventists before some of us were even born. But this sealing angel, which is Gabriel, with the writer's inkhorn by his side, returned from the earth and reported to Jesus that his work was done and the saints were numbered and sealed. Then I saw Jesus, who had been ministering before the ark containing the 10 Commandments, throw down the censer. He raised his hands and with a loud voice said, It is done. And all the angelic hosts laid off their crowns as Jesus made the solemn declaration, He that is unjust, let him be unjust still, and he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. Now listen to these words here in the earlier writings. Every case had been decided for life or death. While Jesus had been ministering in the sanctuary, the judgment had been going on for the righteous dead, and then for the righteous living. Now, do you want to know when you receive the seal of God? Now, you need to hear my CD that I did examining the teachings of Bill Parks on the 7 seals. And I quote him this text, and it just comes to my mind just now as I look at these words here. And everybody ought to memorize this page here. It's 5T, page 475 of 5T. Beautiful word. Joshua and the Angels, name of the chapter. While Satan was urging his accusations and seeking to destroy this company, what company does he want to destroy? He wants to kill the 144,000. That's who he wants to kill. Now, before the close of probation, there will be many martyrdoms in Adventism. The people that will die under this church condition will be the Smyrna condition. They've been faithful to death. And God, the promises of Jesus, He'll give them a crown of life. That means they could be given a loud cry for years and years. They've been a faithful witness for Jesus. And then right there at the very end, just before the close of probation, they sealed their testimony with their blood. And they'll be in heaven under the Smyrna church conditions. The 144,000 will be in heaven under the Philadelphia conditions. All Laodicea will be spewed out. Not one Laodicean will be saved. Spirit of Prophecy says the Laodiceans are worse than the infidels. And yet Seventh-day Adventists are so mixed up over this Philadelphia or Laodicean condition, they are even bragging that they're proud to be a Laodicean. But here is when you receive the seal of God. While Satan was urging his accusations and seeking to destroy this company, holy angels unseen were passing to and fro, placing upon them the seal of the living God. That's 5T, page 475, 476. Those who are distrustful of self, who are humbling themselves before God and purifying their souls by obeying the truth, these are receiving the heavenly mold and preparing for the seal of God in their forehead. Now today, you're either preparing for the seal of God or the mark of the beast by your actions. And if we're purifying our souls by accepting the counsel of the true witness and get some spiritual discernment, you're not getting any spiritual discernment by following the evangelism in a can. Watch this new leader for It Is Written, this man from Canada, Boostra. I wouldn't even want to even begin the discrepancies that he has presented there. He's not, don't tell as many jokes as Doug Batchelor, but he's got a few. But today, we want to be those that are distrustful of ourselves. We're humbling ourselves before God, and we're purifying our souls by obeying the truth. You just can't work yourself up into a frenzy and say, I believe, I believe, I believe. You got to obey the truth. These are receiving the heavenly mold. Now, you don't have the seal of God yet. You're only receiving it. You're being molded. But here is when. You spell when, W-H-E-N. When. They're purifying their souls by obeying the truth. These are receiving the heavenly mold and preparing for the seal of God in their forehead. They don't have it now, but they're preparing for it if you're doing these things. When the decree goes forth and the stamp is impressed. Now, do you understand what that means? That means years ago when they would seal a letter and they would melt that wax right on where the envelope was sealed, where it was glued together, and then they would pour that hot wax right over that where those two pieces of paper met. And when the wax was still hot, they would put that seal in there, or the ring, whatever it was that sealed it. When the decree goes forth and the stamp is impressed, their characters will remain pure and spotless for eternity. How very, very, very plain. Now, since the label on this tape is concerning when will the Ark of the Covenant be found? Let me bring this point out right here. Yes, that Ark will be brought forth. Let me read to you when. Great controversy. After God the Father delivers His people from the death decrees hanging over their head, 144,000 are ready to die at midnight, and God the Father, His voice during the seventh trumpet. Now I'm going to open my Bible here pretty quick, because that's exactly, we'll find out exactly when it is God the Father reveals His Ten Commandments from the sky. But earlier, this book right here is as good as you're going to get right here. Great Controversy 6:39. After God the Father delivers His people, it says, while these words of holy trust ascend to God, the clouds sweep black and the starry heavens are seen. Unspeakable glory in contrast with the black angry firmament on either side. The glory of the celestial city streams from the gates ajar. Then there appears against the sky a hand holding two tables of stone folded together, says the prophet. The heavens shall declare His righteousness, for God is judge Himself. Psalm 50, verse 6. That holy law, God's righteousness, amid thunder and flame, was proclaimed from Sinai as the guide of life, is now revealed to men as a rule of judgment. That's when the Ark will be found. But Adventism will always be off balance until they put Revelation in its proper order, the sequence that it should be given. Now, Revelation 11, my, what a beautiful, beautiful words are in that chapter that Adventism hath totally delegated to the past, wouldn't dare ever look at any words there. Now, I hope I've got Revelation in my book here. My pages are coming out. I've lost a few pages somehow, some way. They're threadbare. But anyway, right here. Revelation 11:19, I'm sure. And the temple of God was open in heaven, and there was seen in His temple the ark of His testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. There's no question as to when the ark is seen in heaven. It's during the seventh plague, seventh trumpet, when the great hail comes of 86 pounds. And when it comes, that's going to sweep away a refuge of lies.